Tonight, the strongest hunters on Earth are gathered in one banquet hall, and I came to hide a soldier inside each of their shadows. But while America celebrates the Night of the Hunters, something ancient walks into the Hunters Association in Seoul, and no one senses it enter. It calls itself the Frost Monarch, and the man it came to kill has been hiding a power no hunter on Earth ever suspected. AI Anime and Manga presents Solo Leveling. If the Monarch War Igniting has you hooked, a like really helps. And tell me in the comments, did you see President Go's secret coming? Subscribe so you don't miss what the Frost Monarch set in motion, and channel members get every episode early.
Booze!
Jinwoo went in for a hug with tears in his eyes, but I easily evaded him. I raised an eyebrow at Jinwoo, who had volunteered to look after Jinwoo while I attended the conference. What's gotten into him?
I showed him this when he woke up.
Jinwoo held up the newspaper he had been reading. The front page contained pictures of the defeated Scavenger Guild members, plus the face of the bloodied and unconscious Thomas. I had thought it natural to save Jinwoo, but Jinwoo had only found out through the article. Who would have thought someone would take on both the best guild in the world and its guild master, Thomas Goliath Andre, in order to save Jinwoo's life? Jinwoo was moved to tears, and he was unable to contain himself upon spotting me. But my agility was well above an S-rank hunter's, and no matter how hard Jinwoo tried, he couldn't catch me. Dodging Jinwoo's attempt one more time, I turned quizzically to Jinwoo while pointing a thumb over my shoulder. Are you saying this guy read the article in English?
Oh, the interpreter from the association felt bad that she was being paid to do basically nothing, so I had her translate the article for Hunter U.
The tip of Jinwoo's nose was red, as if he was upset by my continuous dodging.
Boss!
Here. Jinwoo took the tissue I handed him and blew his nose hard. Hunk. I understood how Jinwoo felt, but I couldn't let him slobber all over the expensive suit I'd brought for the conference. Calming down, Jinwoo wiped away his tears.
By the way, boss, when did you learn English?
It looked like Jinwoo remembered my conversation with Thomas even as he was passing out. I had a lot of time on my hands when I was a low-rank hunter. I had basically been jobless when I wasn't scheduled for a raid, so whenever I could, I'd taken the opportunity to pick up some English to prepare for the future when my hunting days were over. I never thought I'd use it like this. I had fond memories of teaching myself the English language, but I never would have dreamed that my first conversation in English would be with Thomas Andre.
Oh, right.
Jinwoo nodded. Considering my past, he was even more touched by my loyalty and willingness to fight the whole of the Scavenger Guild just to save him, a mere D-rank hunter. Jinwoo began to tear up again.
Boss! I will always believe in you and follow you to the ends of the earth.
His eyes turned red and his nose began to run again. I smiled, but damn this keen perception stat. My extremely keen senses heightened my perception of Jinwoo's emotions, and it made me emotional in turn. I looked to Jinwoo to avoid Jinwoo. I guess he can go now.
Yes, Hunter U's doctor was quite surprised that his injuries had completely healed overnight.
Okay, then let's get him discharged and head to the hotel. The Hunter Command Center has a car waiting for us.
Understood.
I'll get ready, boss.
Jinwoo began to pack with swollen eyes. I watched him fondly, thankful that he was safe. Yet at the same time, I still felt bitter and angry at the culprit behind the whole incident. Greed, you know what to do when we go back to the hotel, right?
Yes, my king.
As we left the hospital, I comforted Greed by telling him that he had to assume the position for only 2 hours this time. The Hunter Command Center had sent 2 cars. I joined Adam in the first because I wanted to discuss a personal matter with the agent. Jinwoo got in the second car with the 2 people from the Hunters Association. Adam was sleeping with his head leaning against the window. His shoulders twitched and he shook the sleep from his head as the door opened.
Oh, you're here, Hunter's son.
Adam looked run down. Exhausted from his busy schedule and the events of the last 2 days, he had bags under his eyes. I looked at him with pity as the driver started the car. I got straight to the point. Could I have a list of the hunters you'd like me to protect? This jolted Adam fully awake and his face brightened.
Have you changed your mind?
No, I'm just curious.
Oh.
Adam couldn't hide his disappointment, though this wasn't entirely bad news. Apparently, I had some interest in the matter. Adam continued with a smile.
I'll create a list for you as soon as I get back to the Hunter Command Center.
I checked the time. It was already 9 o'clock at night. Was it my imagination? Or did Adam look even more run down than he had a few minutes ago after incurring yet another task? Sure enough, the agent looked like he was struggling to keep his eyes open and not fall asleep in front of me. I couldn't take it anymore and reached across the seat.
Huh? What?
As I covered Adam's eyes with my left hand, Adam's voice cracked.
Hunter-sung?
He froze at my instructions. Stay still, okay? This would have been creepy under any other circumstances. But it was me, the hunter who had almost beaten Thomas Andre to death, doing this to him. Adam swallowed hard, trying not to panic. I tilted Adam's head back and poured a healing potion from the system shop into the agent's mouth. What's this? The agent was freaking out about being forced to drink an unknown liquid with his eyes covered. But as the mysterious substance went down his throat, he suddenly felt energized. As I removed my hand from Adam's face, the American realized that the drowsiness he'd felt earlier was not just gone, but he felt as if his body was light and refreshed, like he had just woken up from a good night's sleep. He was no longer fatigued like he had never been to begin with.
Hey, Hunter-sung.
How did he do this? I just shrugged at the quizzical look in Adam's eyes. Trade secret.
I see.
Considering how incredible this was, Adam didn't bother to question it. He moved his body this way and that, his voice a mixture of shock and awe.
Hunter-sung, how should I say this? I feel like even if you weren't a hunter, you'd be successful at whatever you chose to do.
The praise seemed rather over the top, considering Adam was a top-notch agent of the Hunter Command Center who knew how to speak more than 10 languages. Regardless, I smiled at the satisfaction on Adam's face. Besides, this made it easier to ask him a favor. The list of the hunters needing my protection was just the preamble. Could you also please organize a meeting with the hunters on the list? That would be my golden opportunity to conceal one of my soldiers within each of their shadows to guard against attacks from the monarchs. However, Adam shook his head. I had been worried about this. Although the Hunter Command Center possessed great power, it might be too complicated to gather such amazing people together on such short notice. I frowned. I suppose that would be too difficult.
No, that's not it. There's no need to organize such a meeting.
Adam smiled as he explained the last item on the conference agenda.
Because we've got the Night of the Hunters.
It sounded like the title of a video game, but Adam seemed excited about it.
It's this big party thrown by the Hunter Command Center for the hunters who attend the conference. If you want, you can meet everyone there.
A party? What better way was there to casually meet the hunters I needed to assign shadow soldiers? I grinned. Perfect. I could get to the monarchs through the hunters and figure out who were my enemies and who were my allies. And from there, I could figure out who to fight and how to fight them. Sounds good. I leaned back in my seat as the car drove into the American night. The best hunters from all over the world, along with their entourages, were gathered inside a banquet hall with a 1,500-person capacity for the Night of the Hunters.
Wow.
Jinwoo gawked at the sight of the legendary hunters he had only ever seen on TV. Meanwhile, those same hunters looked at me in a similar light. As soon as I entered the hall, I was the center of attention. Hey, over there. He really is on another level. Jinwoo received as much attention as his boss. So the person next to him is. He's the one Hunter-sung fought Thomas to rescue. The Hunter Command Center had released a statement earlier that day to clear the air. Hunters were shocked that I would take on the entirety of the Scavenger Guild to save my D-rank colleague. It was a sobering testament to the fact that I wasn't merely bluffing on that first day of the conference. I will protect my family even if it means becoming an enemy of all hunters. They'd seen the pictures of the aftermath of the fight with the Scavenger Guild and hoped that I wouldn't have to make good on my promise. In any case, now that the truth had been revealed, everyone wanted a chance to talk to me. Their image of me had gone from the monster who had beaten Goliath to the hunter who had saved his colleague. The first person to bravely introduce himself to me was the chairman of a well-known company specializing in handling of the remains of magic beasts.
It's an honor to meet you, Hunter-sung. I'm interested in purchasing the cadavers of the giant-type magic beasts. Do you have a minute to spare?
Since giants normally spawned as bosses in A-rank gates, it was very rare to find a perfectly intact corpse. A desire to grow his business compelled the chairman to make contact as soon as possible. Well, that worked out. I smiled and introduced Jinwoo to the chairman. I'm usually in charge of raids, and I let my vice president here handle business matters.
Oh, is that so?
Flattered by my introduction, Jinwoo proudly stuck out his chest and extended his hand for a handshake.
I'm Jinwoo Yu, Vice President of Ajin Guild.
Pleased to meet you. I don't usually like talking business under these circumstances, but I'll make an exception for you.
I watched with satisfaction as Jinwoo led the chairman somewhere quiet to talk. That kid really is a real businessman now. With those two distractions out of the way, I refocused my attention on the actual reason I was here. Adam approached me.
Here's the list.
He handed me a tablet that listed the names of the 10 best hunters in the world in order.
The Hunter Command Center has a system that awards each hunter points based on performance. These are the top 10 individuals with the most points.
I thought it interesting to see a hunter's career represented by points. I noticed that my name was missing. So where do I rank on this list?
If we include points for getting rid of the giant-type magic beasts around here.
Adam indicated the space between numbers 3 and 4. Zhigang Liu, Thomas Andre, and Christopher Reed topped the list, so to have my name right below those three despite my shorter career meant I had been performing brilliantly. Number 4 is Siddharth Bhushan of India. 5 is 1 through 5 were all national-level hunters, and the ones below them were extremely formidable people. Suddenly, a noise distracted me from the list. The hunters seemed confused by the arrival of an unexpected guest. Once I spotted the newcomer, I handed the tablet back to Adam.
Hey, Hunter Sung.
Don't worry. As expected, the newcomer strode toward me without any hesitation. Zhigang tried to intercept but was brushed aside. The guest soon stood before me and took off his sunglasses. Thomas Andre. Everyone was unnerved at the sight of me and Thomas, whose arm was bandaged, facing each other. Thomas stood a head taller, so he literally looked down on me.
Hunter Jinwoo Sung, I'd like to ask you something.
What could Thomas possibly have to ask me? I thought it odd, but the national-level hunter didn't seem hostile, so I acquiesced.
This arm.
Thomas raised his left arm wrapped in bandages.
Healers told me they couldn't fix it because the magic power that hit me was so strong. Doctors told me the same thing. They said it was healing but would take a long time to fully recover.
Thomas had used his left arm to block a punch from me packed with magic power. By the end of the fight, Thomas's bones were shattered almost into dust. There was a good chance he wouldn't be able to use his left arm again. It had mended to this extent thanks to the healer's quick response and Thomas's own regenerative ability. My attack was unimaginably destructive. One question plagued Thomas's thoughts as he suffered through the pain of his injuries, but he could only get an answer by approaching me like this. I wondered if Thomas was here to show off his injuries. Thomas continued.
You could have ended me along with everyone else in my guild?
Thomas and his subordinates had been responsible for kidnapping Jinwoo in a foreign country and then attacking me when I came to rescue my colleague. Hence why the Hunter Command Center had recognized that I had acted in self-defense. They wouldn't have punished me even if I had killed everyone there. Not that there's any way to actually punish me. However, I had spared everyone apart from Dong-Su Huang. If Thomas had been in my shoes, he wouldn't have let anyone live. He would have had power as well as the justification to do it. But why had I chosen not to? This question had plagued Thomas's thoughts for the last 2 days.
Why did you let us live?
Thomas himself had admitted defeat and asked for mercy, but the choice had been in my hands. I'd even spared the guild members who had battled my shadow soldiers. Thomas was curious as to why, but my answer seemed almost too simple to justify Thomas's mental agonizing over the past few days. None of you did anything to deserve death. While his arrogant attitude had been annoying, Thomas and the Scavenger Guild had shown up at the abandoned factory to rescue Dong-Su, one of their own. Though they had attacked me first, they had suffered enough for their actions. That was the conclusion I had reached in making the decision to spare their lives. Thomas nodded at the response.
I see.
Considering Dong-Su's fate for his crimes, Thomas realized that I was being genuine. What a simple and clear reason. Thomas had even more to ponder on, but he felt at peace. He smiled.
When my arm gets better, I'd like to have a meal with you. If you leave your number with my manager, I'll drop you a line later.
With his cautious invitation extended, Thomas turned. Laura, who was waiting behind him, bowed her head. And with that, Thomas left the banquet hall without looking back. The hunters in his way parted like the Red Sea. Laura watched as Thomas walked off before turning to me.
My boss was expressing his gratitude for sparing his and our guild members' lives.
I didn't know how to respond to that. How was I supposed to get any of that from what Thomas had said? Laura explained.
He may not look it, but he gets embarrassed quite easily.
Okay. If she said so. I nodded. More importantly, this exchange meant I didn't have to track Thomas down to assign a shadow soldier to him.
If it's no trouble, could you let me know how to contact you? Oh, and
The blonde beauty smiled.
our guildmaster would like to give you a token of his appreciation. If you need anything, please let me know.
Oh, thank you, but no. I politely declined her offer. Laura's smile turned awkward as if this troubled her.
Our guildmaster is a very competitive person. He doesn't like being indebted to anyone, so please, it can be anything.
I was about to decline again, but sensed it would be rude to do so. The issue was, I didn't really have anything I needed. I had already made quite a lot of money through raids. Ajin Guild's profits were well above most large guilds thanks to the sale of the Giant's remains alone. Of course, it wasn't comparable to the financial might of the Scavenger Guild, but it was more than enough for us. I don't think I'd need their help, either. But just as I was about to decline the offer again, something popped into my head. Wait a minute, this is the Scavenger Guild. The guild consisted of the most elite hunters ever gathered. They had cleared countless dungeons, so they must have also acquired a great number of artifacts. Perhaps there was something worthwhile in their inventory. I reluctantly asked, maybe a useful dagger. The Demon Monarch's dagger hadn't worked on several adversaries with incredibly strong defense, so the Scavenger Guild might have something that could help. If it wasn't up to par, then I just wouldn't use it.
A dagger. Understood. Thank you, Hunter Sung.
Laura finished writing down her notes with a wide smile and then left the banquet hall. Adam had been tense throughout Thomas's unannounced visit, but he finally exhaled in relief.
Hunter Sung, are you going to meet with the other hunters on the list now?
I should.
Let me help you find them. Our agents are stationed throughout the banquet hall so we can locate the hunters quickly.
No, thank you. I grinned. There's no need. I had already deployed some shadow soldiers, and they had found the hunters within the banquet hall. All I had to do now was greet each hunter. Adam was perplexed by this refusal.
Pardon?
I asked him a question instead of answering him. So why is there one hunter missing? I can't find number 6.
How did you know?
I shrugged and Adam nodded as if he understood. Ah, another trade secret, Adam explained.
We haven't been able to reach that hunter over the past few days. The Brazilian government is secretly searching for them, but they haven't turned up yet.
I nodded. I had placed a shadow on number 2, Thomas. Numbers 3 and 6, Christopher Reed and the Brazilian hunter, weren't present.
Roger.
I walked around the banquet hall and talked to all the hunters on the list. I asked Adam to introduce me, as I wanted to find out more about the hunters I was leaving with my shadows. I started with number 1, Zhigang Lu, and finished in order with number 10. Huh? Is Hunter Sung trying to network here? But he's only talking to hunters who are. After having seen whom I was choosing to converse with, they hoped I would also approach them. The hunters who had been anxiously awaiting me lowered their heads in disappointment when I passed them by. Soon, my work was done, and I left the banquet hall with my entourage after assigning shadow soldiers to all the hunters on the list. Oh. Hunter number 10 cheered, but others sulked and drank in silence. The next day, the Hunter Command Center was at a loss as to why alcohol consumption had been so much higher compared to previous years.
Tomorrow is the last day, right?
Assistant Director Connor handed a cup of coffee to Adam, slouching in his chair. Adam sat up immediately and politely accepted the drink.
Thank you, sir.
Michael patted Adam on the shoulder and took a seat next to him.
I started to hyperventilate when I first heard that Goliath and Hunter Sung were fighting, but I'm glad everything turned out okay thanks to your efforts. Good job.
You don't need to mention it, sir.
Despite his words, Adam's face lit up at the praise. His reaction brought a smile to the assistant director's face.
So what's it been like with Hunter Sung?
Adam pondered the question.
Sir, did you know Hunter Sung still works out every day?
He works out?
Yes, I've witnessed it with my own eyes. He runs 10 kilometers, does 100 push-ups and sit-ups and squats as well.
What?
Michael's eyes were wide with wonder. Jinwoo was the most powerful hunter in the world, yet he still did a daily workout routine. Jinwoo's physical status was already beyond human, so it wasn't like a bit of jogging would do much for him. The assistant director couldn't understand why he'd go through the trouble. Adam explained.
I think he's doing it more for the mental discipline.
For the mental discipline.
Adam nodded. Based on Jinwoo's casual attitude toward advanced technology, his commitment to not skipping a workout, his mysterious ability to heal an exhausted body and mind, Adam considered Jinwoo the living embodiment of someone amazing. Michael couldn't agree more.
He truly is a great man.
How great would it be if Jinwoo were an American hunter? Michael couldn't help feeling jealous of Korea. Huh? The coffee tastes different today. He usually found this coffee quite flavorful, but today he couldn't bring himself to drink half of it. He found it to taste quite bitter. There was a rumor in Korea that if one wanted to locate the office of the president of the Hunters Association of Korea, just look for the room with the lights on late at night. President Go was in his office late again, trying to finish his work. There had been more incidents recently due to the growing number of more powerful magic beasts and awakened beings. It was the president's job to handle these matters. It was also the source of the president's headache.
Wikori.
President Go put his paperwork down on his desk and rubbed his tired eyes. How strange. He'd had continuous heart palpitations as of late. Ba-dump, ba-dump. It had been a while since he was first diagnosed with heart problems, but something was not right these days. Is this the end? His doctor had told him he'd be dead within 6 months if he didn't retire. He'd made it 1 year and then another. Even if this is the end, I've had it good up to now. Gun-hee laughed in spite of himself. A brief laugh escaped him. In the past, he would have pushed himself to stick around for just a little while more, but he no longer felt as anxious. What's changed? What was the difference between then and now? After some quiet thought, President Go chuckled at the obvious answer. Thanks to Hunter Jinwoo Sung, Korea now had the power to stop an S-rank level disaster. The country's status had gone up because of Jinwoo's existence. Maybe his heart had held out until now so he could meet Jinwoo. A bittersweet smile crossed his face.
What kind of nonsense am I spouting?
President Go's voice echoed in the empty office. Speaking of Hunter Sung, isn't he back in Korea tomorrow? He perked up at the thought of Jinchul debriefing him on everything that had gone on with Jinwoo. Ring. It was his phone. Who's calling me at this hour? Had there been a terrible accident somewhere? President Go felt uneasy as he answered the phone. Are you busy tonight? It was his wife.
My dear.
He relaxed when he realized she was checking on him because of the late hour.
Of course not. I'm heading home soon.
The call suddenly cut off with the sound of static.
Hello? Hello?
There was no answer from his wife. What was going on? President Go happened to glance out the window as he put down his phone. He was rendered speechless. Everything he should have seen through the window was gone without a trace. Buildings, roads, even people. The scenery outside had changed to pitch-black darkness in a matter of seconds. Something impossible had happened.
How in the world?
Startled, President Go stood up and realized someone he had never seen before was sitting on his couch as if they had always been there. A human. No, this doesn't feel like a human. Besides its strange presence, the figure also had a face as pale as a corpse. Long white hair, sharp pointy ears, and silvery eyes that shone like gems. It was an ice elf, otherwise known as Ice Slayers. But President Go hadn't sensed it when it entered the room. He slowly put the phone down and asked in a low voice,
You, who are you?
would it be possible to communicate with a magic beast? President Gun-hee Go's eyes were locked on his uninvited guest. The creature did not answer. However, unlike other magic beasts, it also did not show any immediate aggression. It just sat there quietly ignoring the occupant of the room. In this momentary silence, Gun-hee took the time to observe the intruder. It looked similar to an ice elf. Ice elves, otherwise known as Ice Slayers, usually appeared in high-ranked dungeons. Their unique appearance was well known among hunters. The uninvited visitor before Gun-hee had the universal characteristics of ice elves, but was also different enough to make Gun-hee doubt himself. It's as if ice elves were like individual trees, this particular creature would be the ancient tree that guarded the forest. Its skin was cracked like bark. Its fingers were tapered. Hair appeared here and there on its chin, and its eyes looked weary. This was what an ice elf would look like if it lived for several thousand years. Its appearance wasn't the only thing out of the ordinary. Gun-hee subconsciously swallowed hard. I can't sense its presence. Although the interloper had entered the room and sat down on the couch, Gun-hee hadn't noticed until he set his eyes on it. The hunter would have noticed any normal magic beast straight away. I cannot handle such an adversary. Having quickly arrived at this conclusion, he quietly turned over the cell phone on his desk and peeked down at the screen. The magic beast moved to look at him.
This place has been completely isolated from the outside world.
The cell phone had no signal, just as the beast had said. Gun-hee put it down.
Am I dreaming or something?
Not only had this magic beast stolen into the headquarters of the Hunters Association located in the middle of the bustling city of Seoul, but it had addressed Gun-hee in Korean. How could this be anything but a dream? A sharp flash of pain made him grab his left shoulder. This happened as soon as the magic beast pointed at him. Gun-hee carefully removed his hand to reveal what looked like a knife-inflicted laceration. Strangely, despite his flesh being torn, there was no blood. The wound was covered in frost as if it had been frozen over. How? Gun-hee stared at his injury, then looked up. The serene magic beast hadn't moved from its spot.
Did you dream up that pain as well?
President Go nodded firmly.
I understand that this is real, so I'll ask you again. Who are you?
I shouldn't have expected a mere human to recognize me.
A mere human?
The magic beast slowly stood up, and the furniture from the couch to the table to everything else in the room slammed into the wall. Wham! Oh my God. Gun-hee's eyes widened. A cold air slowly crept into the office.
I don't mess around with weaklings. Show yourself, fragment of luminosity.
No one had ever dared to call President Gun-hee Go a weakling, but he couldn't refute this creature. The magic beast possessed great power, and each time it opened its mouth, its voice shook the room like a thunder.
Now!
This magic beast was on another level. Gun-hee's extraordinary perception gauged the power gap between him and his opponent, and his forehead broke out in a cold sweat.
Are you concerned about damaging your vessel? But this vessel will expire soon in any regard.
But if it was hiding because it was scared, the magic beast raised its palms and aimed them at Gun-hee. Cold wind gathered around its hands.
I suppose there is no use continuing this conversation.
Gun-hee stared, baffled, with no idea what his opponent was talking about. The cold air shot out from one of the magic beast's hands. Boom! The blast swept where Gun-hee stood and covered the room in a white fog. It was so thick there was zero visibility. Two lights emerged from the thick shroud. They were a pair of golden eyes. The magic beast smiled at the sight and sent another cold blast. President Go swung his arm and deflected the torrent into a wall. Boom! The wall crumbled to show an endless black void. As the fog slowly lifted, President Go was fully revealed. A powerful golden aura surrounded his entire body.
You've confined us in between dimensions. Impressive.
Gun-hee's voice was completely unrecognizable. The magic beast spoke.
Finally we meet, O bright fragment of luminosity. I've searched a long time for you. Who knew you'd be stuck in a broken vessel, unable to use your power?
Despite sounding thrilled, its facial expression hadn't changed this whole time. It continued with the same frozen look on its face.
We've located all 7 of you. 2 of the fragments have already been destroyed.
Gun-hee was stunned. Not only had he been found, but 2 of his comrades had lost their vessels. The rulers hadn't expected this kind of counterattack.
That face.
The magic beast smiled.
I've always wanted to see panic on that arrogant face of yours. Now I can crush your vessel with no regrets.
You can try, Frost Monarch. Gun-hee roared.
The golden aura covering his body intensified until light emanated from his body. He was the brightest beacon illuminating the dark. Still, even after this display, a mocking smile lingered on the Frost Monarch's face.
Are you going to fight me? How futile.
White light then emitted from the monarch's eyes, and frost began to creep up from underneath its feet. Just as Gun-hee's body was covered in light, a chill wrapped itself around the monarch. The Frost Monarch bared its teeth.
You've only borrowed that human's body, while I've taken over this form completely. Do you really think you stand a chance?
The monarch had let its guard down. Gun-hee seized this rare opportunity and immediately lunged to get a hold of it. But the monarch reacted quickly. Boom. The entanglement of hot and cold energy caused a tremendous explosion. Krakoom. Boom. Kaboom. As the fight progressed, Gunhee's attacks slowed significantly, and his injuries increased proportionately. With each labored movement, he exhaled a cold white breath. In this extreme chill, this frail body could only last about 2 minutes. As the monarch had proclaimed, the result of the conflict was a foregone conclusion. Gunhee's body had reached its limit. He had consumed more mana than was possible, and his eyes were as red as the blood trickling from his mouth. His efforts proved meaningless. Shh! A sharp spear of ice pierced Gunhee in the chest and emerged from his back. Gunhee coughed up blood. The Frost Monarch had delivered a fatal blow by producing ice from its fingertips. It sucked its teeth in pity.
Is that all your vessel can handle, fragment of luminosity? How pathetic.
Panting, Gunhee lowered his head. The Frost Monarch gazed down at him.
How long do you think you'll need to find a new vessel? A year? 2? But our army has already arrived.
Everything in the world would be gone before the ruler's soldiers could arrive.
It was your mistake to try to protect the citizens of this world. Did you consider us inconsequential and forget about us?
The Frost Monarch gave a victorious grin.
Well then.
For its finale, the monarch raised its other hand. Cold energy began forming as the creature readied the final attack meant to end the life of the human vessel the ruler had been occupying. Gunhee laughed through his bloody mouth. The monarch stayed its hand, puzzled. Breathless, Gunhee glared at the monarch.
Did you think I picked a meaningless fight with you?
His left hand tightly grabbed the monarch by the wrist.
Just as we weren't aware of your plan, we have a contingency you know nothing about.
A contingency?
The monarch's eyes widened at Gunhee's confidence. Was he bluffing? No, Gunhee looked too resolute. Just then, the monarch quickly jerked its head to the side. The monarch sensed danger. In that instant, an immense blast of magic power brushed past his face, so intense that it burned Gunhee's right arm. It hit the wall that separated the dimensions and caused an explosion. Kaboom! The entire room shook. What would have happened if the monarch had been hit by the blast? That was close. Fortunately for the monarch, it saw the move coming and had been able to dodge the powerful attack. It laughed. Gunhee had probably spent all his power with that attack.
So was that your secret weapon?
It smiled mockingly, but Gunhee returned the smile.
That's right.
The grin on Gunhee's face, pale from blood loss, made the monarch uneasy. Why was it getting chills when victory had been claimed? It didn't have long to wonder. Crack! The monarch paused. The monarch turned to see the barrier it had erected splintering from the mana blast. Is this what he was trying to do? But this was a futile effort, no?
Tearing down the wall between dimensions changes nothing.
But the spirit of the ruler within the old man's body smirked.
Do you really think so?
Crash. The barrier completely shattered, and the world reverted to its original appearance. The lights from buildings, the cars on the streets below, the president's office. It was all back to normal. As soon as order was restored, Gunhee unleashed the last of his energy and cried out to the floor.
Now!
Beneath his feet, a shadow split from Gunhee's, transforming into the shape of an ant. It evaded the monarch and leaped screaming out the window. Scraw! The monarch stared after it, confused as to where this denizen of chaos had come from. But it was a single ant, a mere foot soldier of the insect king. Still, the monarch could not take his eyes off the shadow as it receded farther and farther away. Wait! The monarch's eyes widened. It should have realized earlier. The ruler had been conserving his energy, even at the cost of his own vessel, so he had enough power to break the barrier for a reason. No, the Frost Monarch looked aghast as it realized the ant's true identity. Whoosh! The confounded creature cast Gunhee aside and bounded after the runaway ant. Cold air spun around its hand to form a sharp icicle. In an instant, it was within striking distance of the foot soldier, but before it could land a blow, someone grabbed the hand, brandishing the sickle in a death grip. Before the monarch could react, it had been seized by the throat.
Urk!
The monarch's heart sank when it saw the adversary who now appeared where the ant had just been.
You, but why?
I clenched the Frost Monarch's neck tightly so it couldn't escape. I stared at the creature, puzzled. An ice elf. I had a bone to pick with ice elves. I had encountered them within the Red Gate, but had failed to extract the shadow of Barca, the boss. I'd been left with only its dagger to remember it by. Just when I was getting over that, I tightened my grip on the magic beast's throat and wrist. Crack. But what was a high-rank magic beast doing here outside a gate? I had exchanged places with my shadow soldier in midair, so I was using ruler's authority to hover about 7 or 8 stories aloft. I interrogated the beast. What are you? Its pointy ears and silvery eyes gave the appearance of an ice slayer, but there was something ancient about it. Plus, Grah. The magic beast gritted its teeth and shook itself free of my grasp. What an incredible show of strength. I had no time to be shocked as cold energy gathered within the magic beast's mouth. The image of the Demon King Balan spitting lightning popped into my head, so I instinctively bent my upper body to the side. Hua! A blast of frozen air shot past me, narrowly missing me. Seeing this display of powerful magic, I quickly put some distance between us. I observed the Frost Monarch as it dusted ice off its shoulder. This was no ordinary magic beast. My perception warned me that this opponent was stronger than anyone I had ever fought. However, I wasn't the only one caught off guard.
How did you...
The monarch urgently looked within my shadow and was unable to hide its shock at the number of soldiers found there.
You have amassed such an army. Why haven't we heard from you?
When I didn't say anything, the monarch looked into my eyes and soon let out a plaintive cry.
I see. So you're the contingency.
What was this magic beast going on about? While I was dying to understand what the creature meant, I didn't have the time for a Q&A session. If I let my guard down even for a split second, my enemy's blade would come at me, and that would be a wound I wouldn't be able to shrug off. My shoulder, which had been frozen for only a moment, was still throbbing. As I quickly inspected my shoulder, I quietly summoned the Demon Monarch's daggers from my inventory. I held one in each hand. Is it a mage type? For Mac. Considering how it had struggled to break free of my grip, it looked like its strength and defensive power were lower than its magic power. I was okay with that. From my numerous experiences fighting magic beasts, mage-type enemies were the easiest to handle. One hit was usually all it took. Even if they had the same level of magic power, I simply needed to avoid its magic spells to eke out an advantage. And the Frost Monarch could tell from the hostile energy emanating from me that an attack without a plan would be inadvisable. After briefly agonizing over its next move, the Frost Monarch reached a decision.
We are done here. I'm not interested in a fight to the death.
What? I frowned. I had no intention of letting the magic beast off, so what did it mean that they were done? My opponent possessed an incredible amount of magic power. I couldn't even imagine how many experience points I'd gained from defeating it. I might level up close to 10 times like I had after killing the King of Giants. Wait a minute, I had a sudden realization regarding the magic beast's identity. Could it be? The monarch pointed to a broken window at the Hunters Association HQ.
Aren't you here to save the human back there?
I had rushed over because the ant I had assigned to President Go had sounded an alarm. My gaze shifted toward where the monarch was pointing and spotted the prone figure of President Go. My blood went cold. President Go was unconscious and covered in blood. He looked like he was on the brink of death.
Choose.
The monarch materialized a large, sharp ice spear.
Fight me or save him.
With that, it launched the spear at President Go. My eyes went wide. Time moved slowly around me as my perception sharpened to the extreme. The ice spear slowly but surely flew toward the president. Ruler's authority. I attempted to stop the spear telekinetically, but the magic power of the weapon repelled the effort. Enraged, I glared back at the Frost Monarch, who awaited my decision. I bit my bottom lip hard before dashing to President Go's body. Whew! A powerful gust of wind erupted from where I had been floating. I appeared by President Go's side right before the killing blow was struck, and I knocked the spear off its trajectory. Creak! The tip penetrated the floor, and cold air began freezing the entire room. Creak! Creak! In an instant, the extreme temperature turned the floor of the president's office into solid ice. Yikes! I picked up President Go and floated us both in the air to escape the spreading ice. I came back down once the frigid process stopped. When I looked through the window, I saw the magic beast dashing toward a small gate. Angered by these dirty tricks, I summoned Barca's dagger from inventory and threw it at the monarch. Dagger barrage. Shh. The blade flew straight into the monarch's shoulder. The Frost Monarch glared at the dagger lodged in its shoulder and then at me. It gnashed its teeth before vanishing into the gate. As the portal slowly shrank, I gave up on pursuing the magic beast. Besides, President Go was in too bad a shape for me to attempt to give chase. President Go moaned in pain. I pressed my lips together as I watched the old man struggle to stay alive. He's too far gone for a healing potion. I had one other method to try. I bellowed. Baru! I could sense a familiar presence speedily flying toward me from the distance. Krakoom! Baru crashed through several walls before arriving to kneel before me.
You called, my liege.
I carefully laid President Go down on the floor and stepped back. The elderly man had lost a lot of blood, and my hands were stained with it from holding him for a short time. I somberly watched the blood drip from my fingers. Baru applied all his magic power toward healing President Go as his master wished. A warm energy enshrouded the president. Woo! But to the ant's surprise, his patient's complexion remained pale.
Sire.
He was afraid to look at his master.
My magic isn't working. I cannot heal him.
What? Baru's hands trembled as he kept working, demonstrating that he was telling the truth. I sensed that my soldier was consuming a great amount of magic power. If this continued, Baru would collapse too. I stopped the ant and checked President Go's condition. Even with Baru's devoted effort, the old man's presence had weakened. I didn't know what had caused the hole in President Go's chest, but it couldn't be treated even if I poured a whole bottle of the best healing potion into it. Damn it. My breathing quickened as I thought about how President Go had done so much for me. In desperation, I pulled out the elixir of life, but someone grabbed my wrist.
That's enough.
The president struggled to open his eyes. President Go. Gunhee tried to breathe as if his next breath might be his last. He looked up at me and Baru.
You came. Thank you.
A smile spread across his face. Please hang on a little longer. I'll bring you to the hospital. Despite the urgency in my voice, Gunhee shook his head.
It's a waste of time. Healing magic can't reverse what the attack did.
President Go. I was upset with him for talking that way, but I paused as the president's trembling hand clasped my own.
Listen carefully.
Gunhee opened his eyes wide like a fire flaring up just before it died out.
I have seen the will of the great existence, their plans, their enemies as well as ours, and what we need to do.
Blood filled his mouth.
I'm so glad that we have you. Who knew you possessed that kind of power? Thank God.
Gunhee began tearing up as he looked at me. He held my hand in both of his as he continued in a shaky voice.
The gates and dungeons weren't for them. They chose those to protect us.
Gunhee coughed out a clot of dark red blood. I quickly tried to use the elixir of life, but President Go shook his head. He knew how bad his condition was better than anyone.
Someday, you'll have to make a choice. When that time comes, please stay on the side of humans.
The pain in Gunhee's voice broke my heart, but all I could do was quietly listen and do as the president requested.
I wanted to fight alongside youngsters like you, but with this body, that was never possible.
Gunhee was sharing this desire for the first time in his life. Some had accused him of founding the association for financial gain. Others insulted him by calling him a crazy old man mad for political power. However, what angered him most was not being able to use the great power he had received. Gunhee had founded the association with his own money in search of a place to use his power, and he had made a place for himself where he could stay close to hunters and advocate for them.
Still, I have no regrets. I leave the future in the hands of young people like you.
President Go's hand released mine and hit the floor. He shifted his gaze from me to the ceiling of his office. Maybe it was because of his tears, but the normally dim ceiling lights looked particularly bright, so he blinked.
I'm so relieved. Thank you, thank you.
With that, President Go said no more. Upon confirming that the president was no longer breathing, I gently shut Gunhee's eyes. President Go had never looked more peaceful than when he uttered those words of thanks. I raised my head. Drip, drip, drip. The sky had been cloudy all morning, and the raindrops finally began falling outside the broken window. The next day, the same set of breaking news graced the front page of every newspaper. First, the great Brazilian hunter Jonas had been found dead near a river. Second, the president of the Hunters Association of Korea had died of a gaping hole in his chest. Last, Jinwoo Sung had returned to Korea.